Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Whadjuk people. We would like to pay respect to the elders of the Noongar Nation, past and present, who have walked and cared for the land, and we acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contributions made to the life of this city and region. I declare the council members' briefing session open at 6 p.m. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be recorded with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. The broadcast of the proceedings of council can be accessed live and on demand through the City of Wanneroo Council Meeting YouTube channel. I would like to say attendances. We have apologies and leave of absence. We have apologies from Councillor Sangali and Deputy Mayor Treby, and we have a leave of absence from Councillor Baker and a leave of absence from Councillor Berry. Deputations. Deputations are to be presented during the briefing session at item 3 in the order of business, and deputations must relate to a report on the current briefing session agenda. A deputation is not to exceed 3 speakers in number, and only those speakers may address the council members. Speakers of a deputation will collectively have a maximum of up to 10 minutes, dependent on the number of deputations received, to address the council members, unless an extension of time is granted. A deputation is to be in the form of a statement, and no debate or discussion on the matter is to occur. Questions from council members relating to the subject matter should be reserved until administration has presented on the relevant report during the meeting. However, a point of clarification by a council member on a specific statement may be permitted. There is an opportunity for public question time for members of the public at item 7 in the order of business. The following deputations have been confirmed on item 4.4, Bulk Waste Review, Community Engagement Outcomes, and that was from Mr Hans van der Linden. He has been unable to attend, but the precis for this has been circulated to council members and they will be able to read it. Our second deputation this evening is about item 4.5, Response to Petition PTO 1/1222, Prohibition of Ball Sports on Arduane Park, Lansdale. And our first speaker is John McKenna. Would you like to take the lectern? Thank you. And just press the button in front of you to turn your microphone on and tell us your name and where you live, the suburb you live in.
Okay. Well, thanks for catching me in the hop. Wasn't expecting to be so quick. Obviously, everybody's seen the petition, so this has come from, there's cricket matches that are taking place in Arduane Park. I must admit, it's not every single night during certain periods of the year, but especially during the summer, there can be, up to 40, 50, 60 people in the park, which is fine. That's usually been the case, but the cricket matches that are taking place are the main cause for concern and the subject to the petition. So basically, I'm just want to go through some issues here that the Rangers have been attending periodically, but we read the sort of report here from the minutes of the last meeting, if that's the right terminology. But there seems to be, it's more based on the noise level aspect rather than the other stuff that's on the petition. So I just want to clarify some of those points. It's not just about the noise level, it's about the damage to the park, the danger to kids who are running out into the street chasing the ball as the cricket match is going on. The game used to just be kids initially. I've been there for 2.5 years now. It was always kids, but it's slowly progressed into adults playing the game as well now. When they're looking at what's in the report, when the Rangers have called, they haven't been there every night, obviously. So the times they've been there, they haven't seen. They're saying it's mostly parents and children, but I just want to tell you it isn't just parents and children. It's adults, full-grown males, who we've had discussions with and tried to ask them to stop, whatever, but we've had various replies saying that because we've called the Rangers, we're more or less getting punished for that. So they've increased the noise levels, the frequency, the ball gets hit harder, it's hitting people's houses. Personally, I've had plants, sprinklers broken as they run through our gardens, etc. But they just say, well, it's not intentional, and don't worry about it. If there's any damage, we'll pay for it. So that tells me that they're expecting damage to come from the game, but they still refuse to stop because the Rangers have told them, you're not breaking any laws, so we can't stop you from playing. So for the Rangers, we believe for the Rangers to come and continually just tell them, be careful, don't make as much noise, whatever, definitely isn't working. So that's why we submitted the petition. But according to this, it looks as if it's not going to progress to another level at this stage. So there's some things I've looked at through the City of Wanneroo's noise information guidelines. Now, I might be reading them wrong, but it says when is noise unreasonable? And it says, as a guide, noise which is clearly audible at a residential boundary may exceed the permitted level. So I'm sure that's definitely exceeding the permitted level, even though the Rangers don't seem to think so. Noise from people yelling or screaming is best described as antisocial behaviour. So I don't know what context that's taken from. And then from the public places and local government property, local law. Nuisance means any activity, thing, condition, circumstance or state of affairs caused or contributed to by a person which has a disturbing effect on the state of reasonable physical, mental or social well-being of another person. Now, it's obviously the social well-being of many people who are on a petition. Another point, 2.1, activities which may be prohibited on specified local government property. The playing or practice of golf, archery, pistol shooting or rifle shooting.
Mr McKinney, you've only got 5 minutes left of your deputation.
Right, so
you've got another two people to speak. Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. George, maybe you want to just go to yours if you get time. Thank you.
Good evening, my name's George Tucker. I'm resident from Lansdale, also on Arduane Street. Mayor, I'll just address quickly some points in the agenda or the report. The point made about city staff who have attended the site various occasions, there's insufficient evidence to support a decision to progress this process. That's in relation to the local law about making a determination for prohibition. Just in relation to that, at the point they're saying there's insufficient evidence to support, just so the city is aware, we do have video footage and of excessive activity and noise which has not been observed by the city staff. Just in relation to the Rangers are attending, and of course, whilst a person in authority is in place, the activity is somewhat watered down, as you would expect. In relation to priority 1.3, the determination, it says, would be a contradiction to that priority. We submit that there's already a contravention of this priority, as currently this facility activity is not benefiting the whole community, only one group of it. The facility is not supporting an active lifestyle or other members of the community who cannot use the facility while these large cricket games consisting of adult males are taking place. It certainly is not supporting a healthy lifestyle, as the activity, noise, verbal altercations are impeding on the mental health of affected members of the community. The activity being conducted is not inclusive to all members of the community. No other member of the community, children or adult, can utilise the facility while these large adult gatherings or adult cricket matches are taking place at such intensity and noise. Activities such as bike riding, skateboarding, football, soccer, flying kites, running, general playground play are unable to be performed due to the concern of being hit by a tennis ball. Children and parents not part of this group on one occasion were told, "Move, we are playing cricket here," quote unquote. Just in relation to the comment about observations by city staff as one being that the level of activities and noise are considered reasonable, and two being the expectation that residents living in close proximity of a park with turfed areas should be expected to experience some reasonable level of activity associated with noise. Just in relation to reasonable level of activity, my question is, what is reasonable? Reasonable is an objective test. It's what is reasonable to the ordinary person. Grown men screaming during a cricket game in a park between 7 to 7:30 p.m. at night, heard from the rear of neighbouring homes, we argue is not reasonable. Vehicles parked across the entire adjacent footpath, blocking the footpaths, we argue is unreasonable. Having your home, doors, windows, roof repeatedly hit by tennis balls, again argue is not reasonable. Having your garden bed, sprinklers damaged because of activities spilling out of the park is not reasonable. And a verbal altercation during which affected community members were told, "If we damage your home, we will pay for it." Again, we argue
1 minute to go.
Is not reasonable. Lastly, in relation to priority 6.4, we are looking for a happy medium so that this priority can be achieved, because as it stands, it appears it is not. What's currently being recommended, is it appears the city appeasing one group of stakeholders over the other. What we propose is a happy medium. No one is requesting for the prohibition of any particular group or park cannot be used by all stakeholders, just not to the extremities as is done so currently. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just one question. If you have video footage of the behaviour, are you able to supply it to the city?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, if that could be, yes. Mark, Mr Dixon, if you could follow that up, that would be good. And Councillor Rowe, you have a question.
Yes, a question of clarification for the deputation, and also, Mayor, if it is possible with your discretion to bring this forward in the agenda, given that we have members of the audience present, that would be good. My question's to Mr McKenna. You mentioned that property of yourself and other individuals had incurred some damage as a result of that ball use, and you mentioned that individuals who were causing that damage had offered to cover the financial expense. Did that ever actually occur, or no? So individuals who sustained the damage had to pay for it themselves?
Yeah, I've had to pay for it myself. And to be honest, to answer your question, I don't expect to ever receive any money. And even if they did pay for it, now one of the plants was $60, which I had to pay for. The sprinklers that have been broken, I've actually had to dig. Now I'm a pensioner. I've had to dig the pipe up right to the bottom of the pipe because it's broken off there on one occasion. But I've had 3 sprinklers broken, and they see me out there fixed, but they don't even offer to say, "Can I give you a hand?" or whatever. But they'll deny it was them that did it anyway. So,
Thank you. Councillor Civic.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mine's a very quick question. Are these cricketers, are they social? They're not playing competition or anything like that? They're just having games whenever it's
purely social.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question for Mr McKenna. In the petition or during the process of when creating the petition, did you think that maybe fencing would address the concerns around the ball?
Fencing?
Yeah, fencing around the park.
But when this all took off last year, or just the end of 2021, we mentioned fencing, but that only eradicates the ball. You'd have to fence the whole park, basically, but it wouldn't eradicate the noise. you're still going to have the noise of the screaming and shouting. So there's a number of issues there, but as I say, to put a fence at the corner where there's the parts surrounded by houses, but unfortunately we're the closest and we're right in the firing line. So, but yeah, the fencing would possibly help from one aspect, but wouldn't cure the issue. We believe the only way is just to stop the cricket completely.
Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr McKenna or Mr Tucker, do you know if the people, obviously it's a large group of people, are they from your area or are they coming in outside of your area? Have you been able to work that out?
They're coming in cars. So it's not as if we've said, look, there's other ovals in Lansdale that are much bigger, and we've said that. And like, there's one over at, what do you call this Carnaby Rise School, forgot whatever it's called, that oval, and it's huge. You know, the other issue in the petition was for volleyball. They've moved that across there. They're playing over there, but they just won't move the cricket. It's a big wide oval. There's no any houses anywhere near it, so. But as I say, the part is because we actually phoned the Rangers. It's worked against us, and they've told us that both to our face, you know. So,
can you just clarify, what do you mean it's working against you because you've asked the city for some help?
Yeah, but what they've said, when the Rangers came, they told them we can't do anything. So we were being asked to call the Rangers again, but it wasn't working. They were using that, sort of laughing, thumbing their nose, saying, well, phone the Rangers as often as you want because they can't stop. They've told us they can't stop us. So we've not got any other avenue, basically, to go. So.
Councillor Huntley.
Do you think that CCTV cameras on there may help?
Only if there's some recourse, that they can, that would work. If there's nothing in the local laws to say, there's no sign there saying you can't play cricket here. Did you say cameras? Did I catch that properly?
We do have the facility of a mobile camera. Whether it could be used in that, I'm not sure. But whether that might.
Yeah, but again, what we are saying is if there's nothing to threaten them with, if you like, you can watch them in the cameras, but if you can't stop them, you can just watch them, but you can't stop them from actually playing, then it's a lot of money and work, I suppose, to put in cameras,
Yeah, that does give us an opportunity to actually witness some of the behaviour.
Yeah.
And, like you're saying, as soon as a ranger turns up, they'll behave, which makes it very difficult for you to get your point over.
Sorry, we believe, and we believe the quickest, most economical way would be if it's possible to do it, is to put a sign up just saying, we know there's signs up in another park up at Wanneroo. I noticed one, no golf. So they're there for a reason. Obviously, they don't want people playing golf there. Thank you,
Mr McKenna. We'll discuss this item later on in the agenda. Councillor Rowe, because Mr McKenna and Mr and Mrs Tucker are going to be asking questions at item 9, there's no point bringing it forward because item 9's at the end of the agenda. So we'll just progress through the agenda as written. Thank you so much for bringing your deputation, and we will discuss the item further and then we'll respond to your questions that you ask it later in the agenda. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much.
Mr McKenna and Mrs Tucker, do you still have further questions you want to ask of council? So we'll bring your item forward then if you're not going to ask questions in the question time. So we'll just bring forward that item, which is item PTO 11222 on page 115 of the agenda. So would Mr Dixon like to speak to this item, please?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. There is just one report from Community and Place Directorate, which is item 4.5, which is convenient. This, as we've just heard, this report relates to a petition requesting cricket and volleyball matches at Ardwayne Park in Lansdale and that they be prohibited. I won't go through the reasons why the petition has come forward. I think they've been articulated through the deputation and also in the report. Ardwayne Park is a small local park that contains a grassed area of approximately 13,000 square metres. Sorry, 1,300 square metres, 13,000 would be very large. A small play area and an area for drainage. The city initially received a complaint in January last year that a group of local residents were using the park each day between 5 and 7:30 in the evening to play cricket and playing volleyball on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. The city's rangers have conducted numerous patrols, as the residents have mentioned, of the park from the date of the initial complaint to the end of April and observed a small group of adults and children playing cricket and a group of volleyballers playing on a Sunday morning. At the time of the patrols, there was no evidence of the cricketers or volleyball players being excessively loud or creating a disturbance, and I will emphasise that was at the time that the rangers visited the site. The activity decreased over the winter months and patrols resumed in October last year. No volleyball has been cited and the cricket activity was as previously observed with families and children involved. Again, no amenity issues were observed during those visits. The use of Ardwayne Park by local residents is informal in nature and there's no bookings made or required. The city encourages, obviously, local residents to use areas for public open space provided in residential areas. From the numerous occasions that the rangers have visited the site, as I mentioned before, there's been no sightings of any antisocial behaviour, but we would be happy to receive any further evidence from the local residents from video footage and obviously review that information. On this basis, administration is recommending that council does not support a ban on cricket and volleyball activities on Ardwayne Park. Notwithstanding, administration acknowledges that there is some tension between residents using the park and those living adjacent to the park, and is proposing to discuss with the ward councillors how best to bring the community together to resolve any differences between the users and the neighbouring residents. It's also proposed that the city's rangers will continue to monitor the park as it has done over the last 12 months. Mayor, either myself or Mr Clem would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Rowe, have you a question?
Yes, Mayor. I have 3 questions on this report. My first question, Mr Dixon and Mr Clem, is that page 116 of the report notes that the city has done work to undertake top dressing of the park after an inspection of the turf quality. Can the city speculate whether the regular use of the park for sporting purposes had contributed to the degradation of the turf, and was the degradation occurring at a faster rate than expected given the age of the park?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It is unclear if the usage or ground conditions were the main impact on the quality and coverage of the turf. The city does undertake renovation works, so it's wetting agent, fertilisers and top dressing on passive areas as standard practice as and when required. The top dressing was identified as being required in Ardwayne Park to ensure the safe, usable space for the community.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Rowe.
Second question. Also on page 116, it states that the level of activities and noise are considered reasonable. What factors are considered in determining the threshold for unreasonable noise? Was the noise measured through an acoustic report, or is this just the professional opinion of the rangers who attended the site?
Thank you, and again through you, Mayor. So the rangers' observations were that the activities being undertaken were reasonable for a local park and not considered loud enough to be classified as a disturbance. Again, that was at the time that the rangers visited. I think that the Rangers' observations was that the noise and activity observed were no different than you would expect in a normal play area of this type. In terms of the regulations, so there's the Environmental Protection Noise Regulations 1997, they don't apply to noise created by human voices. As a consequence, there's no merit in conducting acoustic assessments in relation to typical recreational activities conducted on parks or on reserves. But the city recognises and accepts that children and adults engaging in physical activity on parks and reserves will generate some noise, and it's reasonable to expect that that would occur.
Thank you, Ms Dixon. Councillor Rowe.
And then the last question. If adjoining residents incur property damage due to the sporting activities that occur at Ardwayne Park, is there any liability on either the city or the individuals using the facility for causing that damage?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It is difficult to determine whether a local government is exposed to liability in this situation, as it is entirely dependent upon the circumstances of any given incident. That said, generally the local government is not liable, in the case of the City of Wanneroo, for these types of claims, as they do not have any control, or we do not have any control over the activities taking place. And to expect the city to install nets or fences that would ensure no balls leave the open space and cause damage is unreasonable and would, in my opinion, be cost prohibitive.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Herridge.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to say hello to Julie and John and George. Thanks for coming tonight. Everyone may not be aware, but I have been chatting with our residents for about the last 12 months, so I can completely sympathise. It's fantastic to have it on agenda so we can chat with them. In knowing a bit of the background and that everyone knows I'm a bit outside the box, I was wondering if we could possibly work together with our residents, because at the moment our park works fantastically. It's well activated, but there's possibly a bit of a mix in communication and mutual respect between each other. It would be great if we could come up with a way of getting everybody together, have a little gather, as the kids call it, and go that way and see if we can get everyone to actually have a good communication and chat with each other and see if we can get some working together.
Mr Dixon.
Thank you. And through to you, Mayor, again, I think there's a lot of merit in that suggestion. And we will be happy to discuss with the ward councillors what options are available. I think there is a precedent that was set a few years ago by former councillor Dominic Zappa, where I think he applied for a Kickstarter grant to enable events or gatherings to occur where you could get to know your neighbour and build relationships. So there is an opportunity for that to apply again, I think, to help build relationships, help understand different people's perspectives and, you know, in a respectful way. So through you, Mayor, administration would be happy to try and assist the ward councillors in coming up with some suggestions on how that could occur.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Coetzee.
Thank you. Sorry if I did miss this. Mainly, what ball do they use? Do they use a cricket ball, an indoor cricket ball, or a tennis ball? Sorry if I did miss that.
Councillor Coetzee, you can't ask questions of people that should have been done during the deputation. But Mr Dixon might be able to answer it for you, okay?
Through you, Mayor, my understanding is that it's predominantly a tennis ball that's being used.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Dixon, is it possible to use CCTV cameras on this site to actually get a really good idea of what's going on and have the clarity? I know there is video evidence.
Mr Dixon.
Thank you. That would be possible. We'd obviously have to arrange. There's a mobile CCTV facility that we could use, but depends on its availability, whether it's booked out. I think I also acknowledge that, you know, there is the potential for behaviour to change if people are aware that there are cameras of equipment is being used. So it could certainly, if council wishes us to investigate, that's something we could look into.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Huntley, you have another question?
Yeah, just another question. Because of all the discussion that we've had here tonight, I think for myself, it's very difficult to actually support the recommendation, or rather not support it. It's this is very black and white, but as we can see, there's a lot of grey areas here. Is there an opportunity to refer this back?
Mr Dixon?
That would be for council to decide. I think from administration's perspective, it would be. We've provided all the information that we have available. We would be happy to work with the councillors to identify opportunities for the community to come together. And I think that's probably the approach that we would recommend, is that when residents have an opportunity to discuss in a respectful and friendly way the best way of dealing with these issues that have arisen, it often results in good outcomes from all parties involved. It's an opportunity to just have a chat and work out from different people's perspective the issues and hopefully find a suitable resolution.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Mr Dixon, just a couple of questions. Obviously, in the report, it says the actual playing area is only actually 170 square metres. Well, the grassed area is 170 square. Well, that's what the report states.
I think, if I'm correct, the report refers to a children's play area equipment as 170 square metres, and the actual grassed area is 1,300 square metres.
The other question I had was, with the obviously from your former position as a experienced planner, when we approve parks under our schemes and our local plans, we usually call them a neighbourhood park or a district park or whatever. What is this park's real classification from that point of view?
Mr Dixon?
So it's a local or a pocket park. So it's designed for a relatively smaller catchment area for the residents to use within a walkable distance.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Do you have another question, Ms Councillor Miles?
Yes. So when we approve those parks in those environments, do we not put some, obviously there's going to be some, I wouldn't say conditions, but there would obviously be some limitations on what we would expect as a council to go on those parks. And that would come down to parking and all the rest of it. Surely by the sounds of things of what's going on, rangers would have experienced parking issues and overcrowding in some issues. If they're there for an extended period of time, where are these people going to the toilet?
Mr Dixon?
Yeah, so I think there's a distinction between formal and informal parks. So there's as you mentioned, there's a hierarchy of parks. These parks are principally aimed at the immediate local community within a walkable catchment. So for more formalised use of open space, obviously there are larger parks, and there is a park not that far from here, which is Fragola Park, I think, which is adjacent to the school in Lansdale. It still needs to be expanded. That should hopefully happen in the foreseeable future. For more organised sport, those are the locations, or for larger events, those are the locations we would encourage residents, but we can't enforce that residents are directed to a particular location in the case of informal use of open space.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Do you have another question, Councillor Miles?
The other question I had is, the city does ban some sports on ovals. Can you name one of those sports?
I'd have to refer you to the local law. So the Public Places and Local Government Property Local Law, and I think it's Part 2, If you just bear with me a second. So under part 2.8, it does refer to activities that which may be prohibited on specified local government property, and some of the examples are golf, archery, pistol shooting or rifle shooting, or similar activities specified in the determination involving the use of a projectile which, in the opinion of the local government, may cause injury or damage to a person or property. So those are typically the examples that are given in the local law.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Svitten, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Are you aware, Mr Dixon, the actual people playing here, are they local? Councillor Miles said, you know, parking would be a constraint if they had to drive from all over. It appears to me they would be pretty much locals that may be within walking distance or very few cars would drive to this particular location. Are we aware of that at all?
Thank you, Mr Dixon.
No, I must admit, I don't think the Rangers have provided that information. I understand that there's no parking around the park for visiting people to the park. I would anticipate and expect that you know, a significant proportion are coming from within a walkable catchment, but I couldn't confirm that that's the case.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Any more questions on this item? Thank you. Okay, thank you for coming, and we'll go back to the agenda proper as we were before. So I'd like to go to planning and sustainability. Yeah. I'd like to go to planning and sustainability, strategic land use planning and development, item 4.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 3 reports from Planning and Sustainability tonight. I would like to introduce item 4.1 and Mr. Bowering would like to introduce item 4.2. So in relation to item 4.3, the report is to present the annual review of the East Wanneroo cells 1 to 9 DCPs to Council for consideration. The annual review was advertised in late 2022 following Council's consent to advertise in October. 3 submissions were received and these relate to cells 2, 6 and 7. The key issues raised in the submissions relate to, the first is the prioritisation of Nangara Road, which is in cell 7. In terms of this, the City has written to the Minister request that the road construction be prioritised. The Minister advised that minor roads are still in the early stages of road design and they will let the City know once this progresses. In the meantime, the City has completed the majority of the land acquisitions to facilitate the construction of the road, and administration is also negotiating with 2 remaining landowners to facilitate the land acquisition. So in terms of the next issue raised is the Cell 7 submission also requested that the City doesn't reduce the contribution rate in a cell as was advertised. The submitter argues that it's not equitable that future subdividers will pay less than earlier subdividers. In response to this submission, administration has recommended that the contribution rate be kept the same until there is more certainty about the remaining cost and the income in the future. There's often cost escalations towards the final stages of DCPs, and this is a risk to the City. It's important that the City is protected against having to fund any shortfalls, because if there's any shortfalls due to these escalations, then there's no ability through the planning scheme to recoup those funds from earlier subdividers. So it will fall onto the City to fund that. So what we are recommending is that we keep the rate the same, and then when we close the cell, we return the funds, or when we know more about the expenses, we return the excess funds to landowners. The key issue raised in the submission relating to Cell 2 is that the City should implement the now gazetted Amendment 200, which was gazetted on the 10th of February. This relates to cell 2, just to the north of the Civic Centre. As you would recall, that the amendment reduces the estimated lot yield from the previous 9 lots per hectare to a new lot yield of 15 lots per hectare. So what this does, it brings it more in line with what the actual yield is that developers are achieving at the moment. But as it was recently gazetted, administration doesn't recommend that the 15 lots per hectare be implemented yet. There's still more work that we need to do in relation to that. Administration is recommending that a separate specific annual review be undertaken for cell 2, now that the amendment has been gazetted. That's because of the methodology needs to be worked out on how to potentially return refunds to landowners that developed previously at the 9 lots per hectare. And this methodology also needs to be discussed with all the landowners and negotiated with all the landowners. And then the last issue I want to touch on is the main issue in the submission relating to cell 6 is that the contribution rate should be reduced and not be kept the same, as there's already sufficient funds to cover the future cost in that cell. In this regard, administration has recommended that the contribution rate remains the same, because although there's current excess funds in the DCP, the cost, as with the other cell, could potentially escalate, which put the city at risk to make up any potential shortfall. So administration's main objective is to make sure that the city is not liable for the funding of any shortfalls. And also what we consider as part of that is equitable arrangements in the cell. We have followed a similar approach, as you know, with all the cells that currently have excess funds. And then once we have more clarity about the actual expenditure, then we will consider returning the funds, excess funds, to all landowners that contributed. So we are recommending the same in terms of as a response to the submission. And then lastly, I just want to note that due to a technical error, the capital expenditure plans was excluded from the appendices. There's 8 for each, 9, one for each cell, but that was a hard copy of that was distributed to you earlier. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Heideken. Councillor Savitten, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm very happy with the recommendation as put in by planning. My question is in relation to the closure of cells and fully understanding cell 2 and where that is at the current in the current position. Cell 1 has been partly funds have been executed from that and paid back to some of the developers. I'm constantly getting phone calls from people in cell 6, which is roughly in the area that I live. And they're asking, when will the city close the cell? Now, there are several large developments occurring right now, one along Mirrabooka Avenue, etc., and there are some pockets there that still need to be done. Can you give us some guideline on how much longer it would take to close these cells? Are we looking at 12 months, 2 years? Because I totally concur with your comments made on that and the methodology of the city. But I guess some of the developers have moved on and changed identities and all sorts of things like that, and those funds still have to be passed on in time. So I guess time is of the essence, and that's the basis of my question. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, the administration is aware of the fact that we need to close as many cells as possible, and the reason for that is the administrative cost to landowners is about $70,000 a year. So particularly with cells that are well advanced, in excess of 90%, and cell 1 is only, I think, 2 or 3% still to be developed. We don't see that it's fair to keep the cells open, to keep the DCPs open, because then everybody needs to pay towards the hold-out landowners and their developments. And some of the landowners that haven't developed, could take many years for them to develop, or they might not develop at all. So that's why we are pursuing the closure of cells. What we are doing, we're prioritising outstanding cell works in all the cells that are well advanced to make sure, historical public open space, to purchase properties to facilitate public open space and also other works. Also liaising with the relevant parties, like in this instance with Nangara, right, with the state government, to make sure that we can finish the cell work so that we can close the cells.
Thank you, Mr Van Heineken.
Just further question,
yes,
if I may.
Mr Councillor Civic.
With regards to some of the existing landowners who may never subdivide in terms of the life of the cell, I guess then we have discussed this before, but special arrangement will be made to make sure that they will still have cell costs to pay in accordance with the current procedures. Yeah. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, yes, Councillor, you are correct that we are looking at when we close a cell, that we have special arrangements with the other landowners, i.e. Legal agreements, and put caveats on their properties to make sure that we can get that money in the future when they develop. So, but all of those provisions need to be worked out and need to be included in the planning scheme, so that require a planning scheme amendment, which takes some time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't say me and Councillor Civic always think of the similar questions, but tonight that happens to be that occurs. I also get a lot of inquiries around the closures of those cells, and my cells in particular 3 and 4. Are these projects being prioritised? Because I know these are almost at completion. Are they being prioritised for the next couple of budgets to make sure that we can close those cells in a timely manner? Because I know majority of the other ones still have quite a lot of development to occur, but I know with 3 and 4, probably some of the oldest ones. Have you got a time frame on when those projects will be roughly completed?
Mr Van Heineken. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor, at this stage I can just give a general response, but I can respond in writing with the specifics of those 2 cells. So there's obviously, we're prioritising that and making sure that we I suppose, implement the cell works as soon as possible. But sometimes there's complications like landowners that don't want to sell and things like that, and that means we may have to do compulsory acquisition, which we don't prefer because it escalates the cost. But there are issues. Each cell's got kind of their own particular issues. But yeah, what we've prioritised particularly is historical public open space, because that just means we need to buy, we just expend the funds. It's not, doesn't require a willing buyer and willing seller. So yeah, but I'll respond in more detail specifically to those 2 cells.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yes, several. Thanks, Mayor. My first question is actually with regard to the submission provided by Mr Gravenich on page 2. And just part of my question comes down to, obviously that cell has to acquire some land, which I know it has been acquiring some land, and this is for the realignment of Nangara Road, which is a very, very important realignment. And I know that the city administration wrote through to the Minister for Planning, and obviously the Minister for Planning is Main Roads, but also in your report you're indicating it's still a 2031 possible timeline. That's not quick.
Mr Van Heineken, thanks.
Through you, Mayor, so that particular project, and I can maybe request the Director of Assets to expand on the particular issues. But in terms of that, there's a number of stakeholders. So Main Roads they're in the very early stages of their road planning. So I would say that will take some time before they can complete the design. The land acquisitions need to be finalised, but that's not a major issue. But yeah, we need to work with all the stakeholders to advance that project. So I can refer through you, Mayor, to the Director of Assets.
Thank you. Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Acting Director Planning has already answered part of the question. We still don't have a confirmed timeline from Main Roads. For Nangara Road to be realigned, the intersection at Wanneroo Road, Whitford Avenue and realigned Nangara Road need to be constructed at the same time. Without that in place, we can't realign Nangara Road. That's why the funds are in the cell. Majority of land acquisition is done. I think there are 2 more lots left from my understanding, for which land has to be acquired. I think that process is underway. The reason 2030-31 has been mentioned, there was a report presented to Council, I think, about 12 months ago about changes to the Nangara Road, previously adopted proposed road upgrade plans. As part of that one, we indicated 2 timelines, the western section of Nangara Road, which means the section between Wanneroo Road and Hartman Drive. That could be done before 2030-31. That's our anticipated timeline, based on what we understand from main roads, that they don't have any allocations for the intersection upgrade in the next 4 to 5 years forward planning estimates. So once that gets into the budget estimates, then we will get a better clarity. 2030-31 is just our expected timeline for the western section. That gives us some certainty to then undertake some road rehab works in Nangara Road. Similarly, the other section is from Hartman to Mirrabooka. Again, that is based on the needs analysis we've done. That was also included in the previous report, that section, we can maintain its current shape and form by doing some rehabilitation works, and that will be then upgraded to dual carriageway standard. That's the best option, another, I think, 5 or 7 years after Western Carriageway is done.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I understand the answers that have come from both the Acting Director of Planning and Infrastructure, but this is actually quite a serious road realignment for truck use and also for continuity of traffic coming from the freeway all the way through down into our industrial area. So is it possible then that the city, through maybe its economics team or some other way, to try and escalate this up to maybe the Premier's office or something, or even the local member? Because I think 2031 is something we shouldn't be aiming for. I think we should be aiming for something a lot sooner than that. And also, I'm sure the residents in that northern end of Madley have waited long enough for this sort of to happen. So I'm asking for administration to escalate it through whatever means, Mr CEO, to try and get it brought to the highest levels of the government. I know the Minister is a very senior member, but maybe we need our local members involved.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. The city has actually been, for quite some time, strongly advocating for this piece of essential infrastructure. It has multiple benefits to the city, not only through improved transport networks, but as Councillor Miles said, also unlocks a considerable amount of economic development opportunity for the city, and will continue to maintain that level of engagement for our advocacy strategy for Nangara Road.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Mr Marmion, do you have a comment to make about this? Because I think you've been... Mr Singh?
Thank you, Mayor. If I can just make an observation here. After Council made a decision last year on Nangara Road project report, there was a resolution to write to the Premier and the Minister for Transport. That was done, and we do have, I think we received responses from Minister for Transport, which we can circulate to Council members.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Okay. I will get to you, Mr Marmion.
I think our memories are being jolted as we talk. We also, Mr Marmion and myself, presented to the Industrial Land Supply Committee on several pieces of key infrastructure that the city were keen to pursue to unlock the economic potential of the region, which this road was included in that briefing.
And Mr Marmion, this is part of our economic development agenda that we're prioritising at all times. It's right at the top of it. Would that be correct?
It's certainly in our advocacy plan, Mayor Aiken, and just building on what the CEO said, it certainly is in the 10-year plan for the Industrial Land Steering Committee. But I also understand, having spoken with Main Roads last year, that they are preparing the business case for it. So whilst the time frame is still not locked in, once that business case has been prepared, I'm assuming that it would go through to budget after that.
Thank you, Mr Marmion. Any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. New question. On the issue of Cell 7 and they were talking about if a landowner hasn't developed its land, they may get to have a higher to-sell cost because they, for whatever reason, they've decided not to develop their land, and the submitter sort of indicated, and administration has somewhat agreed, that they may pay more per square metre than somebody from 10 years ago in the same cell on the sell costs. When you do finally, my question is, when you do finally possibly do a refund, how do you calculate somebody that's paying in today's dollars to somebody that paid in 10 years ago at that rate, which was probably a lower rate?
Mr Van Heinen.
Through you, Mayor, in this case in cell 7, there was actually, because of the savings in Angara Road, they're actually paying less. So, but in terms of the refund, we're looking at the methodology in terms of how we're going to do that. So that's looking at making sure that there's equitable distribution and that everybody get access directly related to what they've contributed at the particular stage. So we'll take into account indexation and things like that. But we need to, we still need to work out the methodology, and we'll workshop that with council members as well in consultation with landowners to make sure that it's equitable. It needs to be equitable in terms of past developers as well as future or current developers.
Yeah,
thank you. Are there any more questions on this item?
Because obviously understanding that, yes, there is, it's not equitable if somebody's paying an extra few $1,000s today and to what they paid possibly 10 years ago. And there are some sites, as we were told earlier tonight, possibly the Kingsway Caravan Park and some other sites, they may never ever become developable for whatever reason they don't want to. So they may become something else, like a motel units or something. So I think putting some sort of caveat on the lot and closing the cell is something far more beneficial to that group of developers.
Is that my question, Councillor Miles? My
further question tonight is actually with regarding to the submission on cell 2 by LK Advisory. And obviously with the gazettal of Amendment 200, as you've stated in your report in February, it somewhat makes the costings of 9 lots per hectare as opposed to the new 15 lots per hectare out of date even today. So is there not a way, and I know you've said in your report that you will immediately following this start the process again for that cell, is there no way that you could maybe exclude this one out of that system and actually, because I see it as red tape, you're just making a whole bunch more work when you could maybe excise it or change it from 9 lots to 15 lots. So is there no way that you can expedite that sooner rather than possibly in another 12 months' time?
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr Van Heiden.
Through you, Mayor. So the amendment was gazetted on the 10th of February, which is just the other day. So we really just had the approval. There was no guarantee that the amendment would be approved or whether it would be in the format. The minister could have decided that it shouldn't be 15, it should be 12 or whatever. So we have to work through those issues. The important bit is exactly what we discussed before, is that it needs to be equitable refunds to people that contributed previously, and we need to work out that methodology. We've had some discussions with LK Advisory in December to unpack some of the issues. But it's a highly complex issue exactly because we want to be equitable. So what we are aiming at is to do that immediately. We anticipate that it probably will take about 6 months to do. So it does involve some additional work, but it's more about it's not so much about the yield and implementing the yield part, it's more about the refund and the equitable issue with other landowners, and that's the crucial bit that we need to unpack.
Thank you, Mr Van Hayden. The CEO would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Mayor. Equally, it's important we maintain our compliance. Council has worked very hard over the years to maintain a transparent management of the DCPs, including the annual reviews, and it's a statutory requirement that we maintain those. But I can concur with Councillor Miles. I think the Acting Director of Planning as Assembly has indicated it will be a priority to then undertake the review in response to the gazettal of the amendment. Mr Dixon may not wish to add any more. No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
Working. Oh. Natasha is getting a dodgy button. Yeah, my question also is, reading the report, there are two sort of points of consultation that administration has to do. 28 days to advertise the proposed square metre cost or the valuation cost, and then also 42 days just for the submission period for anybody commenting on that. So just the submission, what I see, the submission period is roughly, what, 70 days? In between the 28-day advertising and obviously administration getting any submissions back, do you immediately just put it out for 42-day consultation, or are they done at the same time? How is that part of the process done to alleviate some of the timeline?
Thank you, Mr Van Hayden.
Through you, Mayor. This was advertised total period of 42 days from 22nd of October to 3rd of December. So we waited for all the submissions to come before we can actually progress the annual review, and we missed the December deadline, and therefore that's why we're bringing it to you now. So essentially, I suppose it happens at the same time, and we wait for the closing date for all the submissions before we progress it.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
Yeah. So part of that question was, but we also put it out for 28 days for the valuation on a separate time. That's how I read it in the report. So you have, on page 8, the city advertised proposed land for a value period of 28 days and then revised the sell cost for a 42 days. So my question is, do you do those in tandem, or do you have to do one, then assess whatever comes back and then put it out for the 42 days?
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr Dixon will respond to your question.
And through you, Mayor, they're done at the same time. So it's not that you undertake 28 days and then you wait for the 28 days and start the 42 days. They're done in tandem, as you would say, or at the same time.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Do you have another question, Councillor Miles? Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, if there are no other questions on this item, okay. Councillor Miles?
Yeah, sorry, councillors. On page 14 for cell 1, it's a question I've probably asked for the last 3 or 4 years. On the map, it states historical POS credit. And I've asked about that every year, and I keep getting told, well, the landowner has to agree, we have to purchase it or whatever. But apparently, to what I understand, is there's no land to be purchased. So I'm just wondering why that is still hanging around, while we haven't given the gentleman some money, because every year we don't do something, as we've learnt recently through a very senior legal place, that cost of land goes up and it actually costs us more overall. So can I ask why that historical POS there has not been dealt with? I understand why the other one won't get dealt with, but that one I understand is not taking of any land, it's just maybe giving some money to somebody.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr Van Hayden?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, you're right. The historical POS is not the actual purchasing of POS. That it is in instances where land was given up before structure planning was done in the very beginning of areas. I would take that question on notice, particularly a direct response on that particular parcel of POS, but we are pursuing all the historical POS because that's we consider that to be the easiest things to resolve. So we are in the process of that, but it does take some time, but I'll provide some written feedback to you.
Thank you. So we're ready to move on to item 4.2 now. Mr Bowring, would you like to speak to that item?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Aiken. Item 4.2 on tonight's agenda deals with another item in the City's ongoing program of closing out structure plans that have completed their purpose. The purpose of this report is to bring some of the remaining provisions of the structure plan known as ASP 21B into the City's District Planning Scheme number 2. This is a normal part of the structure planning process, and the City routinely brings these matters to Council for initiation. They then come back to Council following consultation for a recommendation to the Minister for Planning, which is where we are now with this particular matter. The Minister then will make a determination on this as a sort of a housekeeping function of the planning system. Amendment 196 is intended to carry out this function and in the process iron out any issues that might have been identified since the structure plan was first implemented. In this regard, the amendment is not controversial and no issues with the matter have been raised aside from the one that I'll delve into now. The owner of number 1 Balladong Loop, I think she was the lady, Mrs Garvey was here, but she's left. I was speaking to her earlier today. Mrs Garvey lodged submissions during the consultation phase, essentially requesting to be able to manufacture and sell food, in this case pretzels, from the premises. Her property benefits from a development approval for a corner store. However, corner store does not permit food to be manufactured and sold from the premises. A corner store under DPS2 can only serve a limited convenience retail function. This is currently reinforced with specific provisions under ASP 21B. In response to the submission made by Mrs Garvey, administration is recommending that the provisions in ASP 21B, which are set out on page 59 of the agenda, are not translated into DPS2 as advertised. This is because the definition of corner store and the terms of the development approval that were granted for the site are sufficient to provide planning control and a belt and braces approach is not required. Essentially, we don't require the structure plan provisions anymore and we can use the development approval and the definition of corner store to control the use. I understand that it may be raised by members tonight as to whether there is an option to facilitate. So basically on review, administration considers that it is not necessary to transfer the provisions as there is no additional benefit. I understand that it may be raised by members tonight as to whether or not there's an option to facilitate through this amendment the manufacture and sale of food in addition to the corner store use or broaden the options for the corner store. In this regard, Amendment 196 was not drafted and advertised on this basis of allowing intensification of the corner store use, and therefore the whole amendment would need to be re-advertised to the public and a further report presented to Council at a future meeting, if that is the intent. In relation to the provisions for corner stores, I'll just ask the Acting Director to provide further comment on how we might look at this through the preparation of the local planning strategy.
Thank you, Mr Van Houten.
Through you, Mayor. So we are currently, as you know, preparing the local planning strategy. So the planning strategy provides a strategic framework for land use planning. So often when we do scheme amendments like this one, then the Commission assesses whether there's been a strategic investigation about that, and that will provide the framework for the actual amendment. So as part of our strategy, we are looking at the potential land use permissibilities for corner stores to look at the issue more broadly and more holistically, to see whether there's a potential of some of these to allow some of them cooking facilities and that. We have to look at the land use permissibilities, also the definitions of the planning scheme and that. So we are looking at that, but particularly we're guided by things like, will it have impact on neighbouring properties? Will it have impact on parking and traffic? And also things like fumes and noise. And that will then be considered by Council. We are bringing the strategy to you in the next 2 or 3 months for your consideration, so it will form part of that.
Thank you, Mr Van Houten. Councillor Civic, you have a question?
I was if it's okay.
Sorry,
I
Mr
was
Bowring, you
going
want to continue. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. The owner's submission requests the ability to manufacture and sell foods from the premises, which is defined as takeaway food outlet under DPS2. Use is prohibited in the residential zone as it is an intensive commercial activity that commonly has off-site impacts such as odours, noise and traffic. The site has been the cause for complaint in the past. The terms of the existing planning approval have also been tested in SAT in relation to the manufacture and sale of food from the premises. The SAT affirmed Council's decision to refuse the manufacture and sale of food from the premises, as well as upgrade of kitchen facilities. That decision was made in 2014 and was based on the current provisions in ASP 21B, which are designed specifically to prevent such activity. Now, should Council wish to consider the request in the submission, there are several options available. One which is to progress the amendment as recommended with the changes to not carry over the provisions from ASP 21B. The second option is to look at allowing takeaway food, which is the most appropriate definition of the activity that the owner is undertaking as an additional use on the site. And thirdly, there's potential for a recommendation and re-advertising to allow takeaway food to operate in a limited capacity and perhaps only in association with the corner store use. And the corner store use is also incidental to the primary residential use of the premises, which is limited to 100 square metres of floor space in the scheme. Local planning schemes such as DPS2 are designed to provide a general degree of land use control through setting out a range of zones and land use definitions that establish where activities can and cannot occur. This generally ensures that activities are located in appropriate areas to minimise or prevent conflicts. An amendment to allow takeaway food to operate from the premises as per option 2, which I've outlined, is requested in the submission, could conceivably enable the land to be sold to a commercial operator and the site operator will be redeveloped as a commercial takeaway food outlet. This outcome is considered to be contrary to the purpose of the residential zone and likely to raise significant concerns with local residents in relation to noise, odour and traffic, among others. The third option above suggested is a bespoke amendment which would tie the fast food use to being incidental to the corner store, which is itself incidental to the residential use. The benefit of this approach is to ensure that the primary purpose of the site remains residential and limits takeaway food to being contained within the floor space of the corner store. This would still be contrary to the purpose of the residential zone, but addresses the significant risk of a typical takeaway outlet operating from a residential lot. In either case, the amendment would require advertising, as it substantially varies from the advertised scheme amendment, and the surrounding landowners should be consulted on any such change. It's been administration's advice to the owner to prepare their own scheme amendment application to address their non-compliance issues. Amendment 196 is designed to address a general planning process and not specific landowner requests. It's considered that such amendments should be prepared and put forward by those who would benefit from the application in the same way that development applications, subdivisions and structure plans are proposed. Facilitating a change as requested will assist the owner with their desired outcomes. However, the impact on adjoining and nearby landowners could be significant due to noise, odour and traffic if through change of ownership or even the current owner sought to intensify the takeaway food activity in the future. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Any questions on this item? I'll go to Councillor Wright first.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine was just a small minor question. I think it wouldn't be responsible for me not to acknowledge and ask for clarification on this. Just on page 79, the submitter, which I gather was the owner, explained that there might have been some bias and low-key racism. I just want to address that maybe was probably a misunderstanding of the planning regulations, and just wanted to bring that to light to hear administration side of that.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Mr Bowring, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, through you. Certainly there's no intended or implied racism in the way that the city deals with it. Obviously there's been a long and ongoing issue with achieving compliance with this property, and we haven't done that. There's previously been a SAT case, as I outlined, and there's ongoing health regulation contraventions which are being pursued as well throughout our team. So there are a number of issues with the property that we've been trying to resolve. Notwithstanding that, those issues are, I'm keeping those issues separate from the matter at hand, which is the land use planning.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Councillor Civic, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my questions on this refer to the corner store. I don't have a problem with the recommendation, by the way. I mean, the corner store has been there for a long, long time. Previously, was that a non-conforming use corner store under R20, or was it actually a corner store under Caramar at the time? The application came later. I'm just trying to remember when the application came in, but it was a long, long time ago. That's the first question. The second one is with regards to the high density coating. These are all around public open space. And I think you've clarified that, but just for clarification, are those implemented by the city? And if any of the landowners around these particular pockets want to do it, they have to come to council with a new application.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Mr Bowring, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. So the corner store has been there for a long time. It was originally as the number 3 Balladong Loop was originally part of the same lot, and that was when the corner store was in place. It was subsequently subdivided. And then the corner store, the scheme provision, and the structure plan improvement actually applies to 3 Balladong Loop, which has no corner store, but that's because it goes back that far. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. And the other question?
Yes. Around the reserves, so the
density, the higher density around the reserves, was that implemented by administration, and then the applicants or the owners of those particular lots will come to the city asking to, I guess, build from an R30 perspective.
Yeah, so where there's density around parks or reserves, yes, it's up to the applicants to come forward and lodge those applications. But certainly where there's a benefit to an owner, it's generally the presumption is that the owner will lodge their own applications rather than be put forward by the city.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Was there another question? Yes, Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Bowring, I'm just wondering for clarification, when you say commercial outlet in the form of a takeaway store, are you talking about a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Hungry Jack, something like that?
Thank you. Yes, it could be a commercial operator such as any of those companies. The applicant has, the owner of the property, Mrs Garvey, has requested to be allowed to operate takeaway from the premises. And that is a broad definition which could in fact be used to develop a fully fledged takeaway business.
So just to be clear...
Huntley, you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to be clear, that means that if a corner store operates a takeaway or as a deli or a food outlet, under the new scheme, it would be classed as takeaway full stop, which would then allow a house to be demolished and a McDonald's or a Hungry Jack's or something to go onto that corner. Is that what you're saying?
Mr Bowring.
Thank you. So the request is to allow takeaway, and if that was to be granted as an additional use through a scheme amendment, it would have no essential control. So the owner could lodge an application to demolish and build a purpose-built takeaway facility.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Do you have another question, Councillor? Councillor Huntley.
So you're actually saying that by allowing the word takeaway would give somebody the right to demolish their house and then put an application and possibly have that accepted?
Mr Bowring.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Councillor Huntley, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. So should we then not look at the fact that we have no classification between corner shop, which is, I presume, just the sale of normal things in a corner shop, tins of food, newspapers, whatever, but no food, other than stuff that they can bring in, like ice creams and things like that, where they can sell those. But they couldn't run a deli anymore, so we have lost the word lunch bar or deli in that definition. Mr. Bowring.
Thank you. I'll just take you back to the definition of corner store as it currently exists. So in DPS2, it means any land or building comprising a dwelling house, so you must have the dwelling, attached to which is a shop, not exceeding 100 square metres of gross floor area, offering only convenience goods for sale, operated as an additional use by a permanent resident of the dwelling. So it's very specific about only convenience goods. In this respect, the owners are manufacturing and selling food, which is a takeaway definition. It doesn't fit within that convenience sale.
Thank you, Mr. Bowring. Councillor Huntley, another question?
Yeah, just very quickly. So, in effect, technically, a corner store would then be competing with a large supermarket and not really have any chance of actually surviving in a market if we carry on with the fact that we are now disallowing a deli or any type of lunch bar. However, they can sell a loaf of bread, they could sell packaged ham, packaged cheese, and a thing of butter, but you can't actually put it together on site.
Is that a question?
So the question is that they can sell the stuff, they just can't put it together, because that would be preparing food on site. Is that correct?
Mr. Bowring?
Yes, that's actually the distinction, and there are points at which the planning framework draws a distinction between one type of use and another, and that's what you've hit on there.
Thank you, Mr. Bowring. Councillor Huntley.
So, is there a way that we could perhaps reach a happy medium? I know the new DCP2 only refers to two things, a store or a takeaway. There is no in-between, and yet we're going to need an in-between. How do we get round that?
Mr. Bowring?
And thank you for the question. That's precisely what Acting Director was outlining earlier, which is to address it in a strategic framework through the local planning strategy development and development of provisions within local planning scheme the future planning scheme number 3. So that framework stands a reasonable chance of success, as in my opinion, and it's only my personal opinion as an officer, that an amendment that incorporated a takeaway use at this point would be very unlikely to succeed through the state government, as of the inconsistency with the residential purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Bowring. Councillor Huntley.
So just as hopefully a final question, should we be, as a council, foreshadowing a motion to actually do that, or is that going to happen through the course of events after this?
Mr. Bowring?
That will, as Mr. Van Heiningen was saying, will happen through the normal course of events. It's certainly an issue that can be added to the list of matters that we're going to address in the LPS.
Thank you, Mr. Bowring. Are there any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Same line of questions, thanks, Director. On page 59, under F, where it actually has the Ballindon Loop, Carramar, the permissibility of land uses as per the residential zone as outlined in Table 1, subject to the following. And the only condition that we have in there is that the corner store, excluding the preparation, sale and serving of food to customers in a form ready to be eaten without further preparation primary off the premises. So I understand what you were saying before with regard to the Acting Director, but if you was to remove the word excluding the preparation, would that not then allow them to actually make that sandwich to sell as opposed to just sell the ingredients?
Mr Bowring?
Thank you. We're actually proposing to not keep any of that provision. That table would fall away. So that's what's in ASP 21B, and that's what was advertised. We were initially proposing just to translate those provisions into Scheme 3. What our recommendation is post-advertising is to not carry that over at all. So we'll just fall back on the definition of corner store as it currently sits in DPS2, which will change under LPS, following the gazelle of Amendment 172. We'll get a slightly different definition, but essentially the same. So there's no particular help, but if we don't include this into Scheme 2 now, it makes us easier to address it generally down the track.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
I certainly do. Okay, so with those changes in mind, and bearing in mind, because I guess from my perspective as a councillor, and I know most councillors would agree, sometimes when we say, oh, well, we can do a change or an amendment, that could cost anything up to $15,000 for an individual. That's a lot of money for a very small business that in this case is only selling pretzels and a coffee, I think, if they're allowed to sell coffee, I'm not sure. So is there not a way that either through your part of the organisation or economic development that we can actually help this process move a lot smoother and less cost effective for these small business owners, because they're going to employ a couple of kids, I'm sure?
Mr Bowring?
Certainly the scheme amendment costs can vary dramatically depending on the scale and the amount of research required to prepare them. Typical text amendments can be a lot cheaper. We take a certain amount of fee and then we refund anything we don't spend in our hourly rates, which are published on our fees and charges schedule. But those are quite minimal rates. But again, yes, it is still substantially more than a development application or any other type of application to do that, because there are those processes of eventually having to have it published in the Gazette, in the Government Gazette as well. And it is essentially changing the law around planning for that property. So that's why there's quite a serious amount of attention and detail paid to matters where we're amending the scheme.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
Yep. So if the director, which indicated earlier that they're happy, the director or the planning department here is happy to visit this scenario in our strategic plan that's coming forward, I think next month. If this person wants to then take up that opportunity of further enhancing her corner store, is that then, once that goes through, is that then just a matter of doing a DA, or what's the process then?
Mr Bowring?
If hypothetically, if there was a new land use definition introduced into the future planning scheme that allowed a broader range of uses, then it would just be a change of use development application if for the property, maybe from corner store to corner store or some other definition that's added to the scheme. Yeah, that would just be a change of use DA.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Any more questions on this item? If that's all the questions, we'll move on to the next item, which is 4.3, Proposed Repeal of Extractive Industries Local Law 1998. Mr Bowring, do you want to speak to this?
No, thank you. I'll take any questions.
Okay, do I have any questions on this item? If there are no questions, I'll move on to assets. Item 4.4, the Bulk Waste Review. Mr Singh and Mr Caro, thank you. Thank you, Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. just give you a brief introduction on item 4.4. That's the one item from SS Directorate on the agenda tonight. Council considered this item back in August last year, where there was a business case analysis for a review of bulk waste collection service which city provides to its community wasn't undertaken. And council endorsed option 3, which was an on-demand service to replace the business as usual, which is the current service, to go out for community engagement. Community engagement was undertaken from September to October, about 4.5 week period, and we received some good responses. About over 1,000 responses were received. The summary of those responses is provided in attachment 1 and 2. When we analyzed those community responses, we got just as some of the stats indicated that community may not have fully grasped the option 3 service which is being proposed here. But some of the comments were that we don't want skip bin service. Option 3 is not a skip bin service. Option 3 is actually on-demand service, pretty much similar to the service community receives now with some modifications. The difference between the service we provide now is that we go from street to street on a scheduled service, and then every household has an opportunity to place their waste within a certain time frame from the anticipated collection time into their verge, and our crews will go in there and collect those waste materials. And that service is provided twice a year. One cycle is for general household waste, normally called junk. The second service is for the bulk green collection. The proposed service is going to provide similar service, similar kind of materials will be picked up. However, it will be by a pre-booking arrangement. The intention is, subject to council decision on this particular recommendation, is that we will have an online booking system. There will be some facility for phone booking as well, but primarily online booking, where our residents will be able to book a service at their convenience when they need it. And there will be, I think we indicating in the business case analysis, we're still working through a lot of operational, logistical issues in that one, that we will try to provide service between 48 hours to 72 hours from the booking time. So they need to start placing the waste materials up to 72 hours prior to the booked time. So the intention would be to divide the city into multiple zones and then have our teams working in each of those zones so that we can provide service at the booked time. Based on the community feedback which we received, I think there is a need for further community engagement and information to highlight what this service is providing. It's not taking away the service, it is providing service in a better controlled manner. It still provides more opportunity for recycling, more resource recovery. That's the intention of our waste plans as well. Provides better visual amenity rather than having the waste lying in the verge in the whole street. For some people start putting a lot earlier than we request them to. So this will be more controlled. It's more convenient, providing service basically when you need it, you can book it. And the overall business analysis which we've done is that this is the most efficient service. The option 3 will provide the most efficient service overall. And the research we've done is that will indicate that the illegal dumping will also reduce by providing this service under option 3. As I said earlier, there's a still need, we feel, that to provide more community information education. Similar to, I think we will have to look at developing a more robust education plan, which on page 105, we indicated some of the steps we'll be undertaking to educate and promote this option 3 to our community, like using our social media channels, our website, our print and digital publications, some direct mail out. We got over 1,000 email addresses from the community members who responded, doing letterbox drops, newspaper ads, and some other outdoor advertising like banners like that. We will look at other options as well. This is not a comprehensive list. They are some of the early indications of how we can engage with the community. We did have success with our rollout of 3-bin system, and that was on the basis of having a very strong, well-planned communication plan, education plan being implemented. And I think in that case, we basically touched 60,000 households where we provided a third bin, and also the other 16,000 household, we actually had to go back and change the lids of few bins. So pretty much every household, our teams went to each and every household who received the service. So similarly, we can actually provide that information to our community. One thing which is not in the report is to provide that level of community education and information. We probably will need some additional resources, such as a waste education officer, who will then can be dedicated to work on this project to make sure these things happen. And we will be working very closely with our communications and brand team so that we are actually following our city's own procedures of community engagement policy and plan and well-established procedures. One of the things which in the report indicates that it could take up to 12 months to basically go through the community education and planning and also work out all the logistics. This will require to improve our recycling and provide a service which is very efficient or more efficient, is that we need to segregate the waste material at source. So that will mean that we will have to engage different type of service providers who will receive that waste. One example is e-waste. DWR state government has indicated through Department of Water and Environment Regulation that from 2024, e-waste cannot be dumped in landfill. So it has to be collected separately. That's something which we haven't done that before. So we'll have to find a service provider who will be able to either collect the e-waste at source from the front verges, or we collect it and they can process it. So these kind of procurement processes had to be put in place. And that does take time, given the current market conditions as well. So having said that, it could take up to 18 months. We're still targeting, if the council decides to proceed with it, from July 1, 2024, start to roll out that scheme. Regarding the financials, the business case did indicate this is going to be an efficient option. Since the preparation of business case, a couple of things have changed. I highlighted e-waste just now, and also the market has moved. We do know there is a lot of inflationary pressures, and the service provisions the costs have increased. Having said that, those cost pressures will be applicable to any option. Even if you maintain business as usual, the cost is likely to go up even for business as usual as well. Similarly, the cost we estimated when we did the business case analysis for option 3 will also go up. However, our feeling is the differential may remain in the same order between those options. That's pretty much I wanted to say about this particular item, and the recommendation is that council endorses option 3 to be rolled out to the community from around July 1, 2024. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I'll go with Councillor Herridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just off the bat, I think everybody knows I'm actually quite excited about this, but I have one question. Someone's actually sent this through to me today, so it's from a resident. So sorry for without the heads up. An interesting one, they wanted to know the difference between having a skip bin, the new green one, sorry, not skip bin, that's your fault for saying that earlier. They wanted to know the difference between having the green lid bin and then the bulk. Could we not have got rid of the green bulk now that we have the green lid?
Mr. Singh? Oh, Mr. Caro.
Through the Mayor. In the green lid bin, that's mainly designed for some of the smaller green waste, such as the leaf clippings, so coming from your gardens, whereas this is designed for the bulkier items that cannot fit into the green lidded bin.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. Do you have another question, Councillor Herridge? Okay, Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've had a couple of questions. If the bin system was implemented, the actual size of the bins that would be ordered by the ratepayers, etc., will they vary, or can we get actual bins which will change, or is there a set standard size for these particular bins? They've asked that question. And my second one is apparently the Wanneroo Greens depot is closed on weekends. Why is it closed?
Through the Mayor, I'll answer the first question. Just a point of clarification. I think for council members, the option 3 which has been recommended is not a skip bin service. It is a similar verge collection service, but with a pre-booking system. Pre-booking. There's no skip bin involved in this one. Okay. The second question I'm going to refer to Mr. Kovera to answer.
Can I just, for you, Mayor, just reinforce Mr. Singh's comment there that it's really important that our community understand that we know they love the Verge collection service, and our proposed change that Council will consider next Tuesday is to provide a more customer-focused Verge service where the customer is more in control of when the collection will occur, and we can also achieve our customers' expectations of a better sustainability through recovery by providing more on-Verge recovery. So we're definitely not moving down the bin. We know our community love the Verge style pickup, and we're really moving to a more customer-focused on-call service with an increased recovery and diversion from landfill, because we know our customers value that service.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Mr. Caro.
To answer the second question, the Wangara Greens recycling facility is open on weekends and public holidays.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. Councillor Smith, have you got a question, Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you. So from the feedback, the issue of resource recovery is one of the constituents that they're most passionate about. I think that they love scavenging and things like that. Can you explain how that greater resource recovery is going to happen? For example, is it going to be sorted in and some of the good items diverted to, say, the store at Tamala Park, or how does that work? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Caro. Mr. Singh.
Through the Mayor, I'll explain in summary. I think if we need to expand, I'll ask Mr. Kovera to expand. As I said in my initial presentation, the intention is to segregate waste at source, mean at Verge. So the way the previous reports indicated, we'll be requesting the community when they make the booking to place, say, white goods, for example, in a separate pile, e-waste separately, metal separately, and rest of the household waste material in one pile. So we'll be collecting those materials separately. That increases the opportunity then to recycle or salvage those materials separately. Then in that case, that's the recovery of those materials is higher. At the moment, the way we provide services in all of those materials, other than metals, they all get collected in a truck and they get squashed in a sense, and then they go back to a processing facility where the potential for recycling and recovery is lesser than what we are proposing.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. So is there any opportunity for people, because I can imagine residents wouldn't want it published like there's the 3 days I'm going to have stuff outside my house for people to come to their house maybe. I don't know. It just seems that like this is going to eliminate that ability for people to be able to scavenge in that sense, or recycle or upfurbish or upcycle, any of those things, which is the thing that people are quite passionate about in that sense. Is there any opportunity for that along the lines?
Mr. Singh?
Through the Mayor, that's a particular thing we're trying to avoid. The issue for that is when the waste is placed in a Verge and people come and collect some of those materials, that is unsafe. So the issue for that is and also the materials are scattered and mixed, and the opportunity for recycling and recovery is less. The way we are proposing in option 3 is there will be limited time the materials will be placed in the Verge, and it's by pre-booking, so wider community won't know when we will be picking up that particular waste, when we are going into that particular street. It is by booking. So we'll be in that area, but that particular household, it won't be advertised that this household is booked for that particular date. And we are suggesting in this option that that household will be placing that waste up to 72 hours from the collection, pre-booked collection time. So the opportunity for somebody to come off the street and collect the material is less, and that's what we want to achieve, to maintain that safe environment, to maintain that controlled environment, and also to increase the potential for recovery by us.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Sims would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Smith's comment is a valuable one, and I know from some other councillors' experience there is an opportunity for us to perhaps explore. There are some community Facebook sites that you are free to Gwelup or free to Karrinyup or free to Carramar perhaps, where our customer might be able to put some of their valued goods that they may be putting out for collection for an on-call service on that sort of site, and maybe for our waste education officer there is a role to promote those sorts of options as a means of perhaps providing that recovery in a more safer way. but still achieving that opportunity for community members to be able to repurpose something free of use within their local community. So I think we can perhaps learn from other communities about how those sites in social media can be used, and maybe for our waste education promote that as part of this introduction of the service.
Thank you, Mr Sims. Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to get a couple of questions on the record. Given that this option 3, if endorsed by council and going through further community engagement and information, is not scheduled to start until at the very least July 2024, can we please confirm that the business as usual approach will be occurring this year, and when residents will be able to access the bulk waste collection schedule online?
Thank you. Mr Singh.
To the Mayor, the proposal in front of you, which you'll be considering next week, doesn't mean that business as usual will continue until new service start. So we are providing at the moment green. In July, we'll be starting the bulk junk service. Then there'll be another round of bulk green collection in the new year for first 6 months. Then the new booking system will start. And there will be opportunity for people to book the collection of bulk green and or bulk junk service.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Rowe, you have a second question?
Yeah, just a sort of reiteration of the first one. So that the collection for the bulk verge this year will start in July, but when will residents be able to access the schedule to know each month?
Mr Singh?
To the Mayor, my understanding is that schedule is already published on the website. I think it may have gone in recent days, but I was told this afternoon it is already on the website.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been very happy with the process that's been undertaken by our waste team and their level of community consultation. I guess the one thing for me that is sort of lacking at the moment, and I guess it's sort of a weird time period for it, would be the data on the existing service and how many people use that service. Do you have any estimations at the moment with the current green waste collection about how many people are using it?
Mr Singh or Mr Carrow?
Through the Mayor, on the Greenway service, we're looking at a 76% participation. And
Thank you. Councillor Wright. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. And we're currently collating data on the current bulk junk.
Thank you,
if that,
do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. And if that was to translate into the pre-book service, has there been any modelling around the estimation of how many people would drop off just because of the pre-booking mechanism to that?
Mr Carrow?
Through the Mayor, yes, there is some modelling that we've done, whether we're going to go on at 80% participation or 50% participation or the projected 30% participation. If we do go above the 50% participation, it doesn't, in terms of the cost benefit, we'll not be able to achieve that. But to anticipate the type of participation that we will get, we assume that we'll be getting the 30% participation, but on launch, it's quite difficult to predict exactly which way it will fall.
Thank you, Mr Carroll. You have another question, Councillor Ryan?
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
one more question. If that was the case and we had a strong participation rate in the news service, and therefore the cost element was not to what was predicted for it because of the huge increase in it, is this a trial for the new way and then we go back to the old way, or is this permanent going forward with the I guess the increase in costs going forward?
Mr Carroll?
Through the Mayor, this is not a trial. This is a permanent going forward, but as presented previously, this is also tied into community drop-off and the expansion of community drop-off. The more community drop-off we have and more access our community has to community drop-off, the less strain will be on the service, and hence we should get a lower participation rate.
Thank you, Mr Carrow. Councillor Parker, do you have a question?
I do, thank you, Madam Mayor. Does administration know the fee of the additional collections that will be charged? And secondly, will there be a limit to the additional collections that can be requested?
Mr Carrow? Oh. Mr Singh?
The current waste charge, which is $410 in this year's budget, does include the bulk collection service. So the one booking per year will be part of that waste charge, whatever it is in that particular financial year. If there is an additional service requested by a resident, there will be a fee charge, and we haven't actually calculated the fee yet. Given that this is council hasn't made a decision, once council makes a decision, we'll be considering if somebody asking for a second, third service or additional service over and above the initial one, how much will be their fee, and that'll be part of fees and charges schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Do you have another question, Councillor Parker?
Yes, and just the second part to that question, would there be a limit to the ones that you can actually?
Mr. Caro?
Will there be a limit to in terms of the sizes of the stockpiles?
No, as to how many times you can give somebody a call and say, can you please come and collect something? So could you do it twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, as long as you were prepared to pay for it, or?
Yes, as long as you're prepared to pay for it, you can order as many times as you want. However, the allocations are for one bulk junk and for one bulk greens. Those are the only ones that are free, but the additional ones, there is no limit.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. The CEO would like to speak to this. Thanks, Mr. Sim.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think the advantage of that option again is it's putting a customer in charge of their waste journey. So we'll ensure cost recovery for the balance of our ratepayers, but it gives the customer more control as to how often they wish to access the service, with transparency as to what that service cost will be.
Councillor Parker, you have another question? Any more questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on a couple of questions with regard to the bulk rubbish. So we have 2 bulk rubbish. We have bulk rubbish and we have bulk greens. The figure that you said before, I think to Councillor Wright, was when you were saying about 77% pickup. Was that for greens or for bulk rubbish?
Mr. Caro.
That was for, through the Mayor, that was for bulk greens.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, you have another question?
So bearing in mind, and I would say that that would be true because greens are probably the most that people hack down and put down the front. But when it comes to rubbish, it would be different. The other part of my question is the current system that we have when we go for the whole of suburb bulk rubbish and people put their fridges out or mattresses and the like. In the past, we've also had people that are in enterprise business that dump mattresses from outside the area and stuff like that. Obviously this new system will stop that sort of form of dumping.
Mr. Caro.
Through the Mayor, yes, this new system will help to reduce that. So in the current system, because it's a scheduled system, we advertise for a period of 2 weeks so everybody knows we're going into a suburb, and residents will put out the waste in advance and it could stay there for about a week or so. So companies and other people outside of that region will know when the waste is out there and then we have that opportunity. But in the current system, because it's a pre-booked, nobody knows when it's going. There will be a limited time in terms of when the waste will be out on the verge. So hopefully that exact circumstance we will hope to reduce.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
And the other part of my question goes to something the CEO said. I guess it's in reflection to an answer that Councillor Smith asked. Currently, you can drop e-waste, fridges and the like free up at Mindarie Regional Council, Tamala Park. We're currently going to do our own community drop-off in the town side or down at the depot, I think this month or end of this month. Are you planning to put more of those drop-off locations in and around the city on a continually basis rather than just once, maybe every 6 months?
Mr. Singh.
Through the Mayor, traditionally we have provided that service once a year in at Ashby Operations Centre. This is in addition to what Mindarie Regional Council provides for its member councils. As Mr. Covero said earlier, we do have Wangara Recycling Centre. At the moment, predominantly it is for the greens. The intention is, as Council may recall, under transition plan, which was adopted when service review was done, that for all of the waste management initiatives to be providing us the best recovery rate and best recycling and cost-effective service is to have community drop-off sites. That's a logical way. We haven't analyzed how many and where we need them, but we already have one site, which is Wangara. So it makes kind of a logical way that we have a community drop-off site developed or some provided at Wangara. So as part of this bulk waste, for this to succeed and achieve its goals, we will have to do some work there where we can then provide an opportunity for community drop off their e-waste and fridges and other recyclable materials there.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Miles, you've got another question?
Having said that, as we know from the state government is now putting another condition on that we obviously have to recycle all e-waste, any electronic piece of equipment going forward. The only way that's going to work obviously is to have the community sites like you say. Has the state government issued any grants to help the city set any of that up, or has there been any discussion from the state government to help set those e-waste sites up, or are they just putting that charge on local governments?
Mr Carroll?
There was, I want to say about a week or so ago, some state government that they've opened up opportunities for to apply for grant funding.
Thank you, Mr Carroll. Councillor Miles, do you have another question?
I did see that, but I thought that was for FOGO, I haven't seen anything for e-waste.
Mr Carroll?
Through the Mayor, yes, there is one for e-waste.
Councillor Miles, do you have another question? Are there any more questions on this item? If there are no more questions, thank you very much. We'll just move on to corporate strategy and performance. Mrs Jennings and Mr Greer. Ms Jennings.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. It's been a busy summer period for the organisation, so we consequently have 14 items here coming through to the first meeting. I'm very pleased to say that one of them is the mid-year review, which is great because that allows us to right-size the budget for the rest of the year and get on with the, particularly the capital. We have the corporate performance report. Excitingly, we have 3 warrants of payments and 2 financial activity statements. There are 3 property reports that we will briefly just speak to. We also have 2 donations report. There's an appointment to committees and also an item about the postal election for October 2023. So perhaps if we could start with the property presentations, please.
Yes, Mr Greer, would you like to start with the property?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just speak briefly to each one, in part because 2 of the items are ones that have made it to council in different formats previously. The first item is the report in relation to the land excision and potential sale to Water Corporation of land at Mary Street. Just noting this one briefly.
Excuse me, Mr Greer, this says it's got a confidential attachment, so if we need to discuss this further, we will need to go into confidential. Just sort of make you aware of that.
Thank you, Mayor. Essentially, the feedback at a briefing session a few years ago was to primarily review the land area and reduce the land area. So the land that Water Corp is seeking is for a bore, an aquifer extraction bore, to provide for the surrounding area. We've reduced the land area in what is, at first glance, a battle axe arrangement, but in fact it's actually an easement on, I guess, the handle of the battle axe, on the basis that if an alternate access into that site is provided in future, the easement falls away and the city then retains the balance of its land. So that's that report.
Councillors, do anyone have any questions on this item? No questions on this item. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably have less to say about the land excision from Girraween Senior High for the road reserve, just simply to acknowledge it's been a process of close collaboration between administration and the education department, both at the school and in head office at the department, ultimately to find a road area that's suitable for the road widening in quite a constrained location, but also minimising the impact on the school. Council members would note that the department and the school are supportive of the proposed excision. Subject to Council's approval, it would then proceed through DPLH and then be dedicated as road reserve, which would support the city's ultimate works to improve safety at the site.
Thank you, Mr Greer. Do you have any questions on this item? Councillor Rowe.
Just to foreshadow an impartiality declaration for next week, I'm a board member of the school, but when the matter was discussed, I recused myself and abstained from the vote.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Thank you, Mr Greer. If you'd like to go to the next item, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The final item relates to the Wildflower Society of Western Australia. It's an item that the majority of council members, I guess other than Councillor Smith, would have seen at this exact meeting last year. It was February last year. It was presented to council. At that stage, there were a number of items that had to be resolved, and I think to the credit of the Wildflower Society, those items have progressed very well. The uncertainty previously was around the potential excision of the land, the servicing costs, some of the terms of the lease, and I guess the suitability of the development. Just very high level, in the time since, whilst the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage is still, I guess it's fair to say, unsure on the excision, administration has investigated the cost implications. The feedback we have is that there shouldn't be a difference, whether the land is in its current Kingsway parcel or whether it's in a smaller parcel. The Wildflower Society has agreed to a contribution to the city's costs for the services that are required for its development. The Wildflower Society has also provided written confirmation that the lease document that was prepared by the city's external lawyers is acceptable, so there shouldn't be more haggling over documents. And finally, the Society has secured a development approval. So the DA was sought on the basis that works obviously couldn't commence until a lease was approved by council. But to clarify that it was suitable and could be capable of being approved by the Planning Commission, they proceeded with that. They have that approval. What that means is if council proceeded with an agreement for lease, subject to some final arrangements around the Department of Defence providing access through its site, which administration is in touch with the department and its representatives about, the works to provide access in a car park should proceed, and then the Wildflower Society's works should also proceed. So it's at a much closer stage, I guess, in summary, than what it was 12 months ago.
Thank you, Mr Greer. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to foreshadow an impartiality interest, as I will be meeting with the proponents later this week, who have offered me a tour and site visit.
Thank you. Councillor Herridge.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Reading through the agenda, page 441, I just picked up the access road will provide access to the vacant land parcel, and I'm just concerned or just wanting to clarify the actual car park and the access way. Is that ungated, gated? Will that be open all the time for netball overflow? Because at the moment you can't get down there. It's cadets' land. So I just wanted to confirm if that was an access way 24/7 after the construction's done.
Mr Greer.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. We'll provide some further clarification in the final version of the report. My understanding is that it is fencing will be provided for each of the lease sites, each of the ground lease sites, so Wildflower and any others, and fencing will be replaced for the cadet site, which would mean access through should be possible, but I'll confirm that in the final version of the report.
Thank you, Mr Greer. Are there any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions, we'll move on to Ms Jennings' items.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to take questions on them, please.
Okay, we'll go from the top, which is Item 4.7, the Corporate Performance Report 2023, Quarter 2. Item 4.6, the Mid-Year Review of the Corporate Business Plan 2022-23 to 2025-26 and the Annual Budget 2022-23. Are there any questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. I have two questions on specific projects, so I did send them through to Mrs Jennings a couple of days ago. Page 129 refers to upgrade for change rooms at Montrose Park in Girraween. This project was first announced in 2019 and carried forward several years due to COVID and other inflationary pressures. Given the age and the delay in progressing the facility, does the City have an update on the estimated timeframe for completion?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Initially, when the project was put in the budget, we were considering that full demolition and reconstruction of this particular facility. But due to the higher cost involved, we are now reconsidering that how best we can utilize the existing structure which is available. So we're now looking at, is it possible to rebuild some parts of it and renovate the building? So we're looking at that closely, that scope, and then intention still is to now deliver this project next financial year in 23-24.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. The second question, on page 130, it talks about upgrades to Girraween Avenue. Can I clarify the scope of these works? I previously tried to get some clarification as to whether it's just resurfacing of the road or if part of that funding is intended for verge upgrades or more of a street beautification or something like that, or if it's just for road resurfacing.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. It will involve road resurfacing, road rehabilitation. Some of the median trees we need to look at. They are actually causing some damage to the road. Street lighting, that's old and that need to be looked at. And a couple of bus bays. Council made a decision, I think, 24 months ago to provide some bus bays in Girraween Avenue. So the scope will include provision of 2 bus bays.
Councillor Rowe, do you have another question?
It might be more of a statement, but that'd be good to get some bus shelters there if there's...
Would you like to put a wood on the end so it's a question? Do I have any other questions to this item? If there are no more questions, I'll move to item 4.7, the Corporate Performance Report 2022-23, Quarter 2. Do I have any questions on this item? If I have no questions, I'll move to 4.8, the warrant.
Sorry, Mayor.
Oh, sorry, you have got one. You didn't put your hand up high enough, Councillor Wright.
I had one question. Sorry, I was flicking through very quickly. On page 151, you've put in there a transport plan development. Is that similar to the already active transport strategy that we've already done, or is this an entirely new one? Is it related to the same substance?
Mr Van Heidenen.
Through you, Mayor, the transport strategy is the high-level strategy. So it includes the broad planning for the city. The intent of the transport plan is to provide more detail in terms of the higher level strategy. So that will, I suppose it's a more at a local scale.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this item? There are no more questions. I'll move towards transactional finance. Do I have any questions on any of the warrants of payments this evening? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mayor. And I haven't been given any questions, but I have got a couple, but I didn't. It's more process, and I have asked this question before, and I have received some advice that council or administration was looking at it. But I'll refer to page 201, line item 11409 and line item 11410. And it's probably not under the direct control of Director Jennings. It's regarding refund of street and verge bonds. We do a large amount of these. And I understand in today's planning, conditions of planning when we build houses and the like, we could quite often just put a condition on there that the verge or the pathway or whatever, if it's damaged or cracked, would have to be repaired. I'm just wondering why the city hasn't done that implementation as yet to cut down on some of these transactional operations.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr Sim would like to respond to this.
Thank you, Mayor. I can advise Council that both the Director of Assets and the Director of Planning and Sustainability are currently reviewing how we handle bonds across the city, and I anticipate both directors presenting a report to the executive leadership team shortly, which will then flow to a council discussion at a future forum.
Do I have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got two questions on the warrant of payments, and Ms Jennings was sent an email with the questions in advance. So my first one was for item 4.10. I don't have the page number with me, I'm sorry, but 12656. Why was governance advice sought on the 12th of the 12th, 2022 from McLeod's, at whose request and what information was given during this request?
Sorry, Mayor, are we on 4.8 at the moment?
4.10, this is about warrants of payments. So which page is that and which item is that on?
Sorry, did you want, are we going by agenda item, or are you just asking
no,
for...
we were just going through transactional finance because I didn't think there'd be very many questions.
Yeah, if you give me 2 seconds, find the page number. Of course, my iPad locks me out. It is on page, when it loads up, it's not liking me today, page 305, and the subtext underneath says governance advice matter 33101, which is different from all the other legal advice that says for the city, and it was at a cost of $375.25. Page 305, and it's the fourth one down.
Yes, Mayor, I can answer that, but we have jumped a couple of items. So, but this is in 410 now.
Yep.
This is a question about, let's see, 12656, I think it is. That is exactly as it reads.
That's 300.
There's general governance advice that was requested over the phone. I think it was a phone call, so there was various things.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. So we'll stick. We'll go back to going through it instead of trying to group it together. Yeah. Item 4.8. Any questions on item 4.8 warrant of payments? No questions. Any questions on financial activity statement 4.9? Any more questions on 4.10 warrant of payments? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Just my last one. On page 397, there was a payment to the WA Electoral Commission, item 13732, the extraordinary mayoral election. Could councillors be provided either through the briefing note afterwards on the breakdown of the costs for that? Just be good to know what's involved in that process, considering we have another item on the agenda coming up.
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I can give that breakdown now if you would like.
Thank you.
It's the returning officer fees was $5,974.36. Other staff, $26,124.22. Postage, $150,549.61. Printing and loading of election packages, $87,418.39. And corporate costs, $10,839.38.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Any other questions, Councillor Wright? Okay, I move on to item 411, the financial activity statement. Any questions to that? There's no questions. I move on to item 412, the warrant of payments to the 31st January 2023. Any questions on the warrant of payments? Yes, Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Again, it's sort of somewhat general. I did ask this last year. It is in the warrant of payments. I need to find it again because I flipped back when we went backwards. But it's it's another charge of $1,700 from the WA Fire Brigade for attending Aquamotion for another false alarm. Now, we've had several of those last year, the year before. I was told previously it was to do with the chlorine or something during the night, but local residents text me now when it goes off, because it's usually at 2 or 3 in the morning. So I'm just wondering whether administration can have a look at that and try and, I don't know what's setting it off, but it's not a fire, but I don't know whether the CEO can take that up.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, would one of the directors like to speak to that, Mr Dixon or Mr
Yeah, no, I'm
CEO?
sure the Acting Director of Community in Place would like to speak to it. I do know, however, that we're in the process of extending the operation hours of Aquamotion to a 24/7 gym. And as part of that, great service that the customer will really enjoy, we'll be looking at the alarm system. So I suspect the Acting Director of Community in Place will say he'll take that on board and incorporate a review of the system as part of that. But Mayor, I would happy to be guided by the Acting Director.
Would Acting Director Mr Dixon like to speak to that item?
I will take that on board and consider that as part of a future matter. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, are there any more questions on item 4.12? If there are no more questions on item 4.12, we go to Council and Corporate Support. Item 4.16, donations considered by Council for February 2023. Do I have any questions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
I have to foreshadow an impartiality interest for this one, as applicant 2 is my local church. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any other questions on this? If there are no other questions, I will move to item 4.17, appointment of member to the Audit and Risk Committee, which will be done next week, so I don't expect any questions on that. Item 4.18, donation to the Lord Mayor's Distress Relief Fund for the Kimberley Flood Appeal 2023. Any questions on that item? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to also foreshadow that I do have an alternative recommendation for this agenda item for next week. And I do have some questions in regards to this item, if that's okay.
If you just ask your first question, we'll work through them.
So the first one is regards to the donation. From my understanding, there's been 3 councils that have donated to this appeal. 2 of them were done by notice of motion and 1 was done by administration. Was there any reason that administration had brought this to council rather than through a notice of motion or from the council direct?
Ms Jennings?
Yes, through the Mayor, this has been our past practice to, when there's an appeal raised, that we do bring an item to the council, because generally that's been the way that the council has appreciated it. So,
thank you, Ms Jennings. Councillor Wright?
My second question, is administration aware that a WOLGA direct email was sent to all elected members that WOLGA, on behalf of all local governments, was contributing financially and also through communication with the Shire of Broome and the Shire of, I forgot the name, sorry, something Derby, in regards to helping them financially?
Ms Jennings?
I'm personally not aware of that, Mayor. I don't know if the CEO received anything.
Mr Sim?
I do recall, I think, Councillor Wright forwarding something perhaps today, but I don't think it is uncommon that WOLGA will adopt a position and local government member councils will consider their own position in terms of donations. But we'll certainly find the correspondence from WOLGA and provide that to elected members.
Thank you. Do you have another question, Councillor Wright?
Yeah, I just have a last question. In regards to this, it's not so much, I'm a big supporter of the Lord Mayor appeal and also donations. I think for me it's more just coming from a corporate, I guess, corporate as a council. I think the issue, sorry, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts here. In regards to this report and the donation, is the city in a, I guess, good position to be giving out money outside the city's boundaries at the moment with the cost of living crisis?
I'll just pass that on to the CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason why this report's presented to Council is for Council to consider that among other issues when it considers this matter next week.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? If there are no more questions, I'll go to item 4.19. Are there any questions on item 4.1? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. Given that the report outlines the preferred method being as a WAC conducted postal election, is the Director aware of any metropolitan councils who have used an in-person election, not for a special election or a by-election, but an actual half-council election that happens every 2 years, to the best of your knowledge?
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Not since postal election has been introduced. Obviously, prior to that, everyone had to do it that way. But since the introduction of postal, I'm only aware of some that have used it for special elections rather than ordinary.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
And just one other question. In terms of the special elections that have occurred in the last 12 months, to the best of your knowledge, the councils who have decided to undertake in-person elections, the turnout has been significantly less than those that have undertaken postal elections. Would that be a fair assessment?
Ms Jennings.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, my understanding is they're looking at a turnout of around the 5% mark for those special elections.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? There are no. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just, I guess, a question either to the Director or to CEO. Is, apart from postal, is there any other electronic means of doing an election rather than postal? So can it be done via another method rather than a post work? Because that's where the cost is.
Ms Jennings.
Through you, Mayor, at this point that's what the West Australian Electoral Commission is offering, and I'm not aware of anything else that's been set up, although we have in the past talked to the Electoral Commission about other options, but at this point there isn't.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Are there any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions, I'll move to the Chief Executive Officer for his items, which is, and we'll start with advocacy and development.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 2 items presented under advocacy and economic development, being the Discover Wanneroo logo modification and the Neerabup Industrial Area Lot 9 1000 business plan. Mr Marmie and I thank Council for their input in the modifications to the Wanneroo Discover logo, which is presented next week for Council's adoption. And equally, the Neerabup Industrial Area business plan was approved by Council previously for advertising and is being brought back to Council now at the closure of advertising, with 1 submission being received, which is detailed in the report, which requires no modification to the business plan. Mayor, both Mr Marmie and I are happy to take any questions on 4.20 or 4.21.
Do I have any questions about 4.20? There are no questions. Do I have any questions about 4.21? Yes, Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note on page, 49, is that 498? Yep. Yeah, 498. Sorry, I haven't got my glasses today. If you go into the issues raised and the administration response, the Quinns Rocks Environmental Group did ask a question, and it does actually state that environmental approval for clearing lot 910 has required obtaining permits. We've actually, I've had a question from a resident who says that they can't actually get hold of that fauna plan, that there are plans there, but it's not related to 9-100. So just wondering if we could be provided with that fauna plan? Fauna and flora plan.
Mr Marmion?
Yes, I'd be happy to look into that. That's obviously with our environmental team manage that. We have a consultant who looks after that, so I'll try to follow up for you.
Thank you, Mr Marmion. Any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess my question sort of takes in the previous item and this item. Is the Economic Directorate team, because it's Discover with the new logo and that, you've got your own website totally separated from the city? So I can't say I've seen it too much, but I'm just asking the question.
Mr Marmion.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. We've actually got two websites that we run in the Economic Development team. One is the Discover Wanneroo website, which this item 4.20 relates directly to, and that is aimed at the visitor market, so tourism and visitors, very specific segment. And the other website, which was launched in June of last year, is the businesswanneroo.com.au website, which is designed to target business customers and investors.
Do you have any other questions, Mr Miles? Councillor Miles?
Normally you'd also have the suite of social media that follows those exact to direct traffic straight back to that. I'm just wondering whether you could send councillors all of those information so we can see what's on those particular sites.
Mr Marmion?
Through you, Mayor, absolutely. There is certainly social media on the Discover Wanneroo website, and we're just formulating our strategy for the Business Wanneroo website as well.
Thank you, Mr Marmion. Are there any other questions on this item? Thank you. Okay, so we have no motions on notice. That'll be later. We have no late reports. Public question time. We have no one in the gallery for the public question time. There are no confidential items. The date of the next ordinary council meeting has been scheduled for 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 21st of February 2023 to be held at Council Chamber, Civic Drive, 23 Dundebar Road, Wanneroo. Thank you for your attendance, and I now declare the meeting closed at 8:26.